By 2029, we will have AI with us that surpasses the combined intelligence of all humans. I go back to the central question of,
what about the jobs? What are people going to do with their lives? I think we are fucking naive as a species.
This is my mission, build tools for people.
And I reckon the repercussions are probably going to be worse than the atomic bomb. These chaps are talking about like 3/4 of the global economy not having a job.
What percentage of people are going to work with a purpose today?
If it stayed as it is today,
That's not happening. It's getting much better.
what are people going to do for jobs?
where all of these large language models are competing for intelligence with one another. What can't it do?
I don't think we've got any fucking control of the horse. Some robot has got its own gallery now,
Amazing.
by the way. Is it amazing?
An LLM that can outcompete that individual can not only produce what they would naturally produce over the course of a lifetime, but can extrapolate from it so that effectively
I think I'm going to be caught in the crossfire.
But let's not jump to this conclusion.
The elitists start looking at the poor as just people that consume food, and then they start thinking, we don't need them anymore. Do we get to a point then where humans are actually the blockers?
I believe it will be a threat. However,
I don't know if you'll be able to convince me. You could try, but I don't know if you'll be able to convince me.
so this is Ben Cawthorne. He's director at SW6. He's a buddy of mine. And he called me yesterday in a complete panic, really. He'd had a sleepless night after watching Stephen Bartlett's AI and Agents podcast, where 4 guys got together to talk about the potential doomsday effect of AI, how it can actually end up transforming the world, the amount of jobs that might get lost. And Ben wanted to understand where it might be going, and he said, hey, Ezra, I know you're in the middle of this space, the agent space. Can we sit down? I want to better understand it. Help me understand it. So we got together today, and, well, this is what happened.
So obviously I call you yesterday after listening to Bartlett's podcast on Adara, the CEO, about AI agents. So basically he has a podcast with Ahmad Masad, who is the founder of Replit, which is basically like an AI tool that you can create software with and apparently implement that software and get it going, right? So that's the first person. Daniel Priestley, who did the podcast with him where they were basically debating the economy, and he's a serial entrepreneur. And then they got Brett Weinstein, who's a biologist. And basically they are going through what they think AI is going to do to the human race and what our lives are going to look like in the future. And quite frankly, it's fucking terrifying. That's the first thing. And it's terrifying. It's completely uncontrollable now. It's gone way, way, way too far. Countries are now in a race, very much, this was another podcast, but this is what I think. We are now in a race a little bit like the atomic bomb. And I reckon the repercussions are probably going to be worse than the atomic bomb, frankly, right? And this is the next thing. This is the next thing. Not to get like emotional and passionate about this, right? But like, you settled me down last night, and then I thought, oh fuck it, I better watch it again so that I'm like in tune with what we're talking about today. And it's more chaos in my mind now. It is going to be carnage. Genuinely, these chaps are talking about like 3/4 of the global economy or human race not having a job and being unemployed because technology is going to replace roles, right? And then, you know, there's parts of the conversation where they're talking around like, oh, but, you know, you could be a plumber, right? And I'm thinking, fuck, could I actually be a plumber? Probably. I wouldn't love it, but like I probably could do it. But then there's not enough plumbing jobs. And then one of the chaps chimes in and goes, oh yeah, until the technology gets good enough to build a robot that can crawl into any space in your home and do your plumbing, right? So we're like, so there's that problem, right? That we can go through. There's then the problem of you've got mass unemployment. So how do governments then support all this mass unemployment? Then you've got the problem of just the human society, and the key things that keep being brought up at the moment are no one's reproducing enough, right? And my brain doesn't quite understand why that isn't horrific until they described it as by 2100 or 2050, the global population could have halved, and like Korea's birth rate is less than 0.7 and all this. And I'm thinking, well, if there's not enough people and that causes loads of problems, then you've got all the mental health because nobody has purpose, right? Because there are no jobs. And Stephen Bartlett, do you know what? I really love the fact that he does it. I don't know if I love him, but I do love that he does it. And I've found myself like re-listening to a lot of the stuff now. This was a really, really good one. But there's a couple of points where he's like, I think what he wanted to do was get a table and talk around. So what are going to be the jobs that people are going to take up in the future? And what I would have loved is if they had chucked a couple of people like, I don't know, a nurse, a truck driver, a teacher around that table. Because quite frankly, right, you've got a guy who owns a piece of AI software who has found his calling with AI, right? I don't want to slander him, but like I can just imagine like probably if it wasn't about probably quite a lonely chap in his room tapping away, that sort of stuff, like really introverted. And he's like now all he wants is everything to be AI because it's his calling, right? You've got an entrepreneur who, quite frankly, if AI takes over the world, he's minted, right? He's absolutely minted. He would have paid everything off. He's got businesses. His life will not change. He is part of the social elite because of his bank account. And by the way, congratulations. If I could be in his shoes, I'd love to go on that podcast and I'd probably be all for it as well, right? And then you've got the biologist who talks absolute sense, but he's almost so smart. The average person goes, he probably is the one that makes the most sense, but I don't really know what the fuck he's talking about, right? And if you just, like, I was sitting there going, what about the jobs? What about the jobs? What are people going to do with their lives? And they're talking about, like, how they are going to get their kids to build apps. And I learned loads from this podcast, and I really like seeing what you're doing. I love seeing all the new tools in business, right? And I'll go on to what I have done since we decided to do this kind of like chat about the podcast, reaction chat. And what they're talking about a lot through the podcast is like what we think is going to happen is only a fraction of what actually will happen, right? And they're like, they gave an absolutely ridiculous, well, not a ridiculous example, but one of the chaps said on it, there's a picture of New York City and it's all horse and cart. Right. Yep. I'm thinking, well, I'm not a fucking horse. But anyway, it's all horse and cart. And then within 13 years, there's no horses. So he goes on to this monologue, right, about like how the horses must have felt, right? And I'm thinking, yeah, but they are animals. And then I'm thinking, but actually kind of we are as well. And then I started thinking in my brain, well, if the horses got made redundant, are the robots going to be watching us run around Ascot, right, having fucking shots of electricity and like partying while I'm trying to climb over a fucking fence at Ascot?
That is most likely a positive outcome of all this.
So that horse story, there's so look, I've spoken a lot there about the terror, but I guess just to kind of summarise, there's no controls on it. All the countries are now fighting to build it. It's travelling at a rate that is genuinely scary. There's 800 million people that use ChatGPT on a daily basis. That's frightening amounts of people, right? That have access to that tool. The argument is that they're not conscious beings, right? They're not conscious beings, and we control them. But what is consciousness, right? Because when I was one, I didn't know what the fuck was going on. I've grown into consciousness, right? These things are smarter than me. They never sleep. They work much harder than I work, like much, much harder than I work, right? And if consciousness is almost just being awake and aware of your actions, this is going to gain consciousness, I think, in terms of like it will know what it's doing and it is smarter than us and it will make faster decisions. And it's like, that's almost like computer game scary stuff.
Yes.
Dissect that.
Yeah, and you were like, help me understand it. And
well, I was thinking more just like economically help me understand it, but then I'll listen to the damn thing again, and it's even more frightening. I think
broader than that. Look, first of all, I agree with the sentiment that it's happening, and what's happened here is it's rung the alarm bell to you, the rate and the speed at which it's happening.
Yeah.
And I describe where we're at right now is the merge. We are in the merge. The merge is not happening. We're absolutely in the merge of technology and human integration.
Yeah.
We've been on that journey for a long time, and it's just really starting to kind of accelerate, right? And I guess the first thing that we need to look at, though, is the types of things that you're raising as issues, and just look at the scenario we've got. So you're talking about, people not having a sense of purpose because they don't have any jobs. You're talking about mental health. You're talking about prosperity.
And my mortgage that I need to pay.
Absolutely. Right. And now let's actually look at where we are today with that. What percentage of people are going to work with a purpose today? With a genuine purpose? What percentage?
Everybody at SW6 for sure.
Sorry?
Everyone at SW6 for sure.
Absolutely.
Especially me. I understand.
So let's look at it. Let's look at that holistically. I'd suggest that, and I think the stats report that it's less than it's less than 20% of people who go to work have any form of sense of purpose, and they are unhappy in their role.
Okay, so that is a direct link to the job itself, correct? Yep. But purpose is not just the job. How many times do you hear when people are talking about their parents, really hardworking, put food on the table?
Yep.
Right? I don't give a shit about what job they're doing. I don't care if they are happy or unhappy in their employment, frankly. I care about the purpose that is associated with providing. Okay. If you remove that... Yep. I don't want this to get...
But let's just roll back a second. Let's roll back. But let's just look at our current scenario, right? So it's easy. I mean, you just need to look at where we are today. How would you describe people's sense of purpose in their roles today? How would you describe the mental health of our population today?
I didn't know the stat of people being unhappy in their job. So we'll go with that stat and say that the workplace isn't fit for purpose in terms of people enjoying their roles. I'm really comfortable with that as well. Yep. By the way, I go back to my dad. He used to be a driving instructor, which was really good for me because I got all my lessons free and passed first time very quickly. And now he's an examiner, so he gives the test basically. Yes. To coin Ricky Gervais. He does not fly to work and is mega happy. My fear is he's coming up to retirement, and although I think that guy is probably better than anybody at just chilling out and doing nothing, right? And he loves it. The kind of mental regression, is that the right word? Maybe. I feel like when somebody retires, the speed of which they kind of reduce their capacity to do kind of anything, yep. and the kind of fall off is mega fast.
But let's not jump to this conclusion that everyone's lost their jobs. There was a
second thing as well that I just tangented off on, wasn't there? It was jobs and purpose.
Yes, but let's come back to this point. Let's just analyse where we're at today. I would suggest that 80% of people go to work unhappy, demotivated, going through the motions.
Yeah.
What's happening to people's mental health right now?
It's declining for sure.
Yeah, rapidly, I would suggest.
Rapidly, yeah.
Great.
Yeah, cool.
Absolutely. So what you're currently dealing with is that we're already in a state of probably the two core issues you're raising of actually being in a rapidly declining and pretty poor way.
Yeah.
Right?
I agree.
Great.
I agree with that. I do. But what I think this will do is make that even more rapid.
Potentially. Let's get to that. Let's get to it. But fundamentally, the current situation is that people are unhappy with what they do, and mental health is absolutely eroding rapidly, particularly due to social media and lots of other reasons, right? So that's our current landscape. The other point is that if you look at the quality of life, and if you listen to Gary, whatever his name is, the kind of the economist that's the People's Economist.
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah, he was in the debate with Priestley and Bartlett about kind of
fine, and So I listened to that. I don't know what his last name.
The poverty line. What's his name, guys? Fire it over for me. But his so he's talking about the poverty line, right? And he's talking about more people falling below that. But actually, the quality of life today for nearly everybody is much higher than it was 10 or 20 years ago. And it's all, 100 years ago.
Yeah, 100, I would say.
Yes.
Circumstances right now, I think, are more challenging than they were 10, 15 years ago. I think if you just looking at the generational shift in terms of being just able to buy a house.
Yes. Yeah. That I agree with that in London in particular. Absolutely. But let's look at the kind of flip of that, which is that education via YouTube and intelligence is available to everybody, which it wasn't 20 years ago. So education is a key indicator of the kind of development of a society. One of the key pillars is actually available and accessible to way more people.
I agree that education is more accessible in terms of the channels that you can get it from, but schools are designed for the 20s, 50s, right? And we are trying to put a square peg round hole scenario of everybody going through the schooling system at the moment, and it is just about fit for purpose for now. And I mean loosely fit for purpose. The rate of change that's about to happen in the workplace over, I think, probably within 5 years, maybe sooner, because of all this technology that's coming in, that's so outdated now.
But when you say that, what was it preparing us for anyway? Like, I don't mean to be funny. What was education really preparing us for over the last 10 years? If you look at it, what was education again? So look at it today. What was your education preparing you for which jobs today? Prior to AI?
Very few.
Okay.
Very few. But I mean, back in the 20s, the 50s, you're going to have writing.
But let's talk about the last 10 years.
Yeah.
Rather than the last
I get that.
50, right? It's kind of you can blow up you can definitely blow up the impact of AI, and I believe it's going to have a huge impact. But let's also look at the environment that it's going to impact. Does that make sense? And the environment is 80% of the workforce is unhappy. Anyway, doesn't get a sense of purpose from its work.
Fine.
Mental health is rapidly declining, right? Education has not been fit for purpose for the last 10 years.
Yeah, okay.
And I wouldn't say that the people then coming out of education have necessarily had this huge gap and that they didn't have 20 years ago.
Okay.
So fundamentally, we're already in a tech-driven kind of, digital consuming world, and there's been an erosion of the kind of those more traditional types of jobs. Now, a way to think about this is, what's the relationship between AI and people? And effectively, AI will become a utility and is a utility to people. We'll get to it takes over and it runs the whole society thing in a minute.
If it stayed
yes,
as it is today and maybe a fraction better, I'd love that.
That's not happening. It's getting much better.
No. I understand that. Yeah. I understand that. But again, what are people going to do for jobs?
We're going to get there. So let's look at it. The landscape, I keep coming back to it. Education hasn't been fit for purpose. Mental health eroding.
Yeah.
No, very few people have purpose in their jobs anyway, right? So fundamentally, the system is already failing those people, our current infrastructure. Now, the reason I kind of address this is that I believe that technological evolution is a bit like the human evolution, right? Which is that technology has this ability, it has a universal impact. It doesn't normally have a siloed impact, right? And what I mean by that is that when you have a universal impact on technology, like for example, the combustion engine, it affected transport as well as different types of farming, different types of machinery, right? So it has as a utility, has a universal impact. And what that means is that AI is no different.
But it can think.
Wait a second, we'll get to it. So AI, okay, the simplest way to think about that is that it doesn't work and just have a siloed impact. So that technological evolution that I talk about means that it is normally able to address the problems that it generates. It solves its own problems. right? So let me give you an example of that. A great one is that AI will expedite scams, criminal activity. We're seeing it, right?
Yes.
So people are able to leverage it for that. However, AI is also accelerating the quality of cybersecurity.
Of its security. Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So you've got this cyclical
Yeah, I get it.
motion, which I call kind of the technological evolution, right? And so what you have to think about is not just a linear, one-sided view of any impact that AI or a technology is having. You have to look at benefit and consequence. Let's take a really traditional view of it, or a really traditional industry, one that's easy to visualize, right?
Yes.
Let's think about Uber.
Yep.
And cars, okay? It's a really easy one to understand. Currently, an Uber, you can call it, it's here, 10 quid to go a couple of miles up the road, right? Fine. Now, your fear, and it's a correct one, is that AI, autonomous driving, will make all of the drivers redundant, right?
Although riding in this morning, that's probably a fucking good thing, because I nearly got knocked off out 3 times. People doing UEs all over the place in London, fuming. Anyway, God, sorry.
On your line bike racing.
No, I've got a lovely little racer.
So, this is the electric bike went, didn't it?
Yeah, the electric bike's rotting in the garden at the moment.
So, Uber, you replace the driver.
Yeah.
Now, you're absolutely right. Loads of drivers made redundant. But the price of an Uber ride comes down by 80% because it's the cost of the
driver is the main cost of an Uber.
The cost of the ride is the driver. Now, that's that's a consequential negative impact of that. What's the positive impact of that? Well, it now makes Uber drivers' transportation a completely different paradigm shift in it as a utility. How we use it, who it's accessible to, the benefits that come with it are opened up enormously. So what happens is that from that, people won't buy cars. There'll then be a fleets of cars, autonomous cars. What does that mean? It means there'll be less car parking. What does that mean? There'll be more building on car parks, right?
More homes for people that can't afford
more
them.
More construction. No, supply of increase the supply. If you increase the supply, prices reduce. As an example, difficult in our country because of the point.
I think it sounds like an absolutely mind-blowingly good, brilliant world.
But the point is, I'm just giving you an example, right? The point is that there are two sides to that. So there's also a huge economy that comes off of that. The demand for cars, right? So let's think about this, right? How often did people used to buy a new Hoover? If you had a Hoover back in the 80s, you might have one every 20 years.
Yeah.
Great.
Built to last.
Yeah, absolutely. Right? When Dyson comes out with his new one, which doesn't need a bag, how many people buy a Hoover?
Yeah.
Fucking millions of people.
Yeah, the V1, V2, V3, well, I think we're on V10, and it's a real good Hoover. I love going shopping for a Hoover.
So there
really
you go,
do.
right? So it's changed our consumption of a Hoover. But also that monumental shift sees a huge investment. And what that does is Dyson sets the pace, then innovation happens in all other Hoover manufacturers, right? And so we have innovation in it. The innovation of that technology creates different utilities as well, that same process. So what's happening there is that there'll be all of a sudden a surge for autonomous vehicles. Everyone will buy the autonomous vehicles, right? And so that in itself, more vehicles, different utility.
How do people buy autonomous vehicles?
Well, they lease them. No, the point is that the purchaser then becomes fleet purchases. We lease them, or we hire them, or we get timeshare access to them.
But it just doesn't solve the original problem of what the fuck does the Uber driver do next?
Wait, so that's the next thing. So where I'm going with that is that you have to then start to follow the kind of consequences, the impact.
Fine.
And there's a negative thing, right? But because that car is now 80% cheaper, we will find all different new ways of using it, right?
Because they didn't know what the plane was for. They thought it was just going to be for war, and then it started going.
Absolutely, right? And so it becomes a utility. Now, it used to be too expensive for me to take an Uber to do this, but now I can do it, and I can do it in a different way. I can now work in my car because I don't need to drive it. So my view is that the future of a car will look like an office.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's autonomous. And I'll work.
They almost become trains on the road.
100%. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. 100%. And so what that does, that opens up an economy of different utilities, different usages for that. So that's the way, and I use the Uber one. I'm just going into detail in that in order to kind of help the mind go on a journey to realize that, yes, there is consequence, but there will also be ways in which that the impact of that, you've got the loss of the jobs, but you've got the fact that the service becomes 80% cheaper. That improves access to transportation to people that can't afford it right now. Okay, so let's move on to your broader point. So that's the transformation of an industry. Okay, the yin and the yang.
Yeah.
Great. What are we all going to be doing? What are the big jobs? Where are they going to come from? Is that your killer question?
Do you know what? It's just. So everything that you just said was I'm on board with. I get it.
Yep.
Well, I get it to a point. Anyway, they spent 2 hours on this podcast.
Yep.
And the what are people going to do in question was never answered.
Well, we'll get to it. We can answer that.
It's constantly this kind of like, you have to be the creative, you have to be the entrepreneur. But I just want to talk about broader society. There is not everybody is entrepreneurs. Not everybody has these creative ideas.
That's bullshit, mate. That's bullshit. That's just not where it's going. You're absolutely right. There will be new industries which open, and the barriers to entry to those industries and opportunities will be lower, like we're seeing now. Globalization. I was with Sean Anderson yesterday, and he said to me, I could run my business anywhere. I could be in Dubai and run my business now. It's virtual. But what that means is that anyone in Dubai could run his business. So you now have a global kind of playing field. And
everything's becoming more and more level, right?
Yes. And now that's great from a global perspective, from a third world, first world, leveling the playing field, right? That actually someone in a far more remote place with a great idea and strong capability now has access to a global market, which again is one of the benefits of the evolution of tech. We're in this merge process, right? So we're on the path to where an AI will help it, that those services, capabilities will be more accessible to people in more locations around the world, leveling the playing field, addressing poverty in different places, raising living standards. The bit you're coming to though is the bit around, what are we going to be doing? So they never answer that. Now, I come back to that first part, which is, well, 80% of the workforce is working without purpose already, and I think.
So, but just on that 80% without purpose, right?
Yes.
Given the choice, how big a percentage of those 80 would take no job over a no purpose job right now? Do you think?
Yeah, but you're jumping to the assumption there's going to be no jobs.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we're going to address that, because that's not going to happen. That will be addressed.
I don't know. I don't know if you'll be able to convince me. You can try, but I don't know if you'll be able to convince me.
Look, I agree. So, and I've written about this a few times. I call it the delta, and I believe there's absolutely going to be a delta between the loss of jobs, and the creation of new. And that actually, that gap, I think, is going to be directly related to the price of costs and goods and services coming down, right, after the loss of those jobs. So as people are able to reduce the costs of delivering their goods and services, they'll then get to grips with that. Then there'll be a competitive landscape, which one guy's been able to halve his operating costs. His competitor hasn't yet, so he's only lowered his price by 10%. But then his competitor reduces his costs by 50%.
You truly see that, do you?
Yeah, absolutely, yes. And what will happen is that competitor will now have to lower their costs of goods and services by 30%. And boom, boom. And then what happens is it will become, each marketplace will find its own
Price point.
20% net margin, 15, 20%, and it will level out. So the prices will drop and those people will compete. So just coming back to your point, which is, there's going to be that delta. But when those costs of goods and services drop, okay, that means that goods and services become more accessible to people. We've just given the Uber part. So people will lose their jobs rapidly when the autonomous car comes out, and then slowly an emergence of opportunity will come out of it, and there'll be a gap. So I absolutely agree with that. But what I do see is that the first thing is that AI is going to increase productivity, and GDP, is directly related to economic output, is directly related to productivity,
and it's falling everywhere, right?
Its growth rate is falling.
Fine, okay.
Its growth rate is falling. So economies are continuing to grow very slowly.
Really slowly.
Yeah, but our growth rate. But after the last industrial revolution between, I think, 1900 and 1910 or whatever, prior to that industrial revolution, it had taken 200 years for the global economy to double in size. Right? It was either 100 or 200, I can't remember. A long time. It took 10 years for it to double from that moment of that industrial revolution, 10 or 12 years.
So that's really interesting because they bring that up on the chat, right?
Yep.
They talk about the industrial revolution and how this is going to be so much faster, so much more change is going to happen in a really short period of time.
Yep.
It is a little bit like you've got a bunch of farmers in the field and then there's a tractor and then they work out what they want to do. I guess it's human evolution, isn't it? And we're always striving for the kind of next thing. I just wonder whether or not this next thing is the thing that really, really fucks us up.
But think about it. So let's go back to it. Let's assume that similar things happen, that there's growth in the economies that comes from this increase of productivity.
Yeah.
Right. So that means that people are now investing more. Now, for sure, with change, there's innovation. Where there's innovation, there's investment.
But the Uber driver doesn't invest now because they're living, they're struggling.
So that's the gap.
But then the elitist gap's going to get bigger. Because look,
Yes.
ultimately, on a personal note, I think I'm going to be caught in the crossfire, right?
Right.
I think kind of my age and my generation, I think we're probably right in the firing line, but as maybe the cutoff point, I think it's not going to affect my parents' lives because it's all paid off, right? If it crashes down now, they're pretty comfortable. They don't have to go to work, right? If there's mass unemployment, I've still got 30 odd years on my mortgage.
Yep.
And I'm sitting there thinking, I run a sales team. I'm relatively creative. I probably could think of some business ideas. I'm in tune. I get it. I do use these platforms daily, so I probably will carve out something that I will do. Mm-hmm. But I can see my life drastically changing.
Yes. Yeah, I agree with that. Definitely.
And I think I'm one of the lucky ones. Do you know what I mean? I'm a handful of the population, by hook or by crook, by the way. I'm a handful of the population that's in a fortunate enough position.
Yes.
There are millions and millions and millions of other people that are much less fortunate, yes. And it's going to be a splinter through society. And it's something they talk about on this podcast, which is the biologists, by the way. The elitists start looking at the poor as just people that consume food. And then they start thinking, we don't need them anymore. And that again is chaos, and it creates more divide. And Sam Altman. Now I should have probably looked into what he's created. You might know.
OpenAI, ChatGPT.
Right, fine, great. Thanks, by the way. You've saved me loads of time. He has started building a company called WorldCoin.
Yep.
And that is a business that is going to solve the problem and facilitate people that don't earn money through jobs. And that guy created ChatGPT. He's fucking seen something, and he knows what's happening, and he's the smart cookie. But he's going to capitalize from the chaos that's about to ensue.
Yes, absolutely, and that actually does keep me up. I spend right now in my AI business, I think about two things. Okay, 50% of my time is going on the innovation of our product and how to go to market, and the second half is about how do I try to distribute and engage the wealth and creation and the opportunity to the community rather than to the tech bros and the big tech players. So literally 50% of my time is on that. So I'm absolutely aligned with you with that there are going to be significant winners. But we have to come back to human spirit, right? And the human spirit, it has always been and continues to be, there will always be people which are pioneering.
Agreed. And by the way, what I think is unbelievable is it does create a level playing field. Yeah. It allows globally, from any economic background to a point, to come up with an idea, create, launch, market, do everything that takes 100 people. You can do it pretty much on your own now.
So now just think about the impact of that a second, right? So would you say that the kind of globalization, this ability to run your business remotely from anywhere in the world, has been a benefit, a positive, and has it accelerated over the last 5-10 years?
It's accelerated. It's a benefit. It's a positive. Apart from probably recruitment businesses, I think is one area.
That's a choice. You don't have to do it.
Agreed.
But having it as a choice means it's a benefit.
Yeah.
What I mean is you might not choose it for your business, but we can now choose that is now a choice to any entrepreneur if they want to run it remotely, hybrid, if they want to be in this country, if they want to access talent from other countries, right? My point is that, do you think that globalization piece is going to be accelerated by the evolution of AI? You've just said it is.
Yes, it already is.
Fantastic. Good. And we see that as a good thing, right? Because that makes the world much more accessible to us, to all of us.
Yeah, I think the next few years are going to be mega positive. I think looking at like a doomsday scenario of the robots taking over because they are smarter and they are smarter. They already are smarter, and I think we are fucking naive as a species. I really do, really naive, and I think we're really naive to think that. I mean, what is the definition of creativity? Because they are the kind of consciousness and creativity are the kind of the two words that seem to be separating us. But surely creativity is basically learned, really, and it is an experience, and it is, and then you get. I don't want to get too deep.
Let's talk about that. Let's just talk about creativity.
Yeah.
Okay. So surely,
yep.
Even over the last 10 years, prior to AI, I could choose to, let's just take real primitive creativity. I could choose to draw a picture if I wanted to be an artist and be creative, or I could choose to find one on the internet very easily using Google, download it, print it. So we're already making, for the last 10 years, the choice of creativity. Right? Get it?
I think I just had a thought then of like fucking Van Gogh, right, sitting in his field painting that lovely picture. A robot will do that better than Van Gogh soon. It is just a fact.
But do you buy it because of the quality of that painting?
They're already selling robot paintings for millions. I think because it was the first one. Did you see that?
No, I didn't know.
Some robot has got its own gallery now.
Amazing.
By the way,
yeah.
Is it amazing?
But that doesn't mean, does it, that someone's created that? That's an entrepreneurial venture. It's not a robot out of nowhere. There's a human behind it, which is driving that
at the moment
and architecting it.
At the moment, from what I understand, by the way, the limitation at the moment is how much data can this thing consume to become smarter, and it's running out of data, and it can only really consume the data that we have put in, so it can really only be as intelligent.
Yes, that's not true as well.
Is it not?
No, it's not, because what the way it works is that. If you take it, I think Facebook said that they ingested 7 million books. They just recently admitted to kind of educating their model on 7 million other people's written books. Now, the way to think about that is that you've got those 7 million books, which you and I are never going to read them 7 million. So first of all, if it reads 3,000 books, it'll be smarter than me because I'm not going to read 3,000 books.
And we can't keep the memory of them 3,000 books.
But take the 7 million.
Yeah.
It then has the ability to synthesize that.
Yeah.
Which means that it can take the learnings in one book and the learnings on another and merge them and draw a new conclusion. That's a synthesized outcome. Makes sense? So you can take A and B and get A plus B. A plus B is synthesized. A and B is currently existing. You and I can get access to A and B. You and I could go and do the work to work out what A plus B is, but we don't need to and that's how it will learn and evolve. But we don't really... The next point is that it's also being used for scientific discovery, for research,
and
so
climate change, and all the good stuff that it could absolutely do.
But that's how so it also has the ability to learn new stuff that we've not learned yet. So when someone says it can only learn what we know, that's not true. First of all, it can synthesize the data that we've already got. Second of all, it's also pioneering discovery. So discovery is obviously what we don't know. So it is increasing the data set. What they really mean is that it's consumed the majority of data and its rate of growth is slowing.
Right.
From its rate of learning from new data is slowing because, well, we've done like 90% of it already. So now there's only...
And when it gets bored of our data that we've put into these books that we've slaved away writing, and then it starts having a little chat with each other, and then it realises these humans... They're quite annoying, aren't they? And then we've probably created a nicer world that we don't need them anymore. Yep. Look, once we decided that we were going to do this, I listened to the podcast again, and then I went back on ChatGPT to talk about what we could talk about, right?
Yep.
And I had a discussion with ChatGPT around... So I got it, first of all, to listen to the podcast.
Yep.
And then I said to it, preparing for a reaction podcast on this topic. It's telling me that I'm a good boy and I've done a good job to do this, right? To have this discussion because, and here are some of the key points, right? So, future employment, the impact of human relationships and mental health, the rise of manager nerds and the changing work dynamics, safeguarding human roles and skills, which I think is now impossible, by the way. Ethical considerations and societal impacts, and then it gives me its final thoughts. But then I thought, you know what, that is good, but I wanted to have some fun then. And I said, what do you think 2030 will look like for humankind? And this is what ChatGPT thinks 2030 will look like, right? So AI augmented workplaces, job polarization. It gives examples of what this will look like. So basically everything's automated in businesses. Everything's automated. Micro entrepreneurship. Now I think that's on the money probably, because I see a world where like almost maybe everyone is kind of a business owner.
Yeah.
And that you might have a job and you're a business owner, and like you like maybe a world of like side hustles might pop up.
But what you got to look at with that, it's just coming back to that yin and yang, the two sides. What you're saying is that access to these technologies and capabilities is becoming greater, so more people can have access to these smart tools. So the plus of that is that there will be more innovation. There'll be more creators. There'll be people that come up with new ideas.
More human problems as well,
Absolutely.
which could, and I agree with this. It could be amazing. It could be amazing if somebody can go, right, this is how you solve climate change, and this is how you do it, and we can drastically improve our world. That would be incredible.
But do you not think that's going to happen? It's happening, isn't it? There's innovation every day. Carbon data, carbon capture systems. Evolving all the time through different innovation.
Do we get to a point then, right, where humans are actually the blockers?
The key question you've got here, right, listening to you, is that, and we need to break it down. The first one is what jobs will we end up doing, okay? The second one is, will AI control humans, or will humans be able to remain in control of AI? I feel like those are the two.
What do you genuinely think on that second point? Honestly,
yes, I believe it will be a threat. However, we have the ability to influence and curb these systems, like nuclear. And now you can say, but it can think by itself. Yeah, but it's also accessible by many different countries to be leveraged. But we've been able to contain Iran for the wrong reason, for having the wrong purposes or wrong incentives with nuclear. So I believe that it's going to be tough. But like I said to you earlier, that technology, my view is there's technological evolution, that it solves the problems that it creates, right? And if you just take that kind of view, what it means is that every capability that it has to have a negative impact, it will have the capability to manage that, to negate that. And we will remain in charge of that from an architect management leadership. And that actually comes back to the first point, which is I think there's a huge role that we will play in compliance and management and architecting AI. I think that's a huge one. The second part is in terms of the roles that are generated, will be new roles that we weren't aware of. So my question to you would be, 10 years ago, did you know that you needed a wearable watch device on your arm like you've got today?
No.
Great.
I probably did. I was really fat.
You're looking great today, mate.
Thank you.
But did you know you needed it?
No.
Great.
It didn't exist.
No, exactly. Now, how big an industry is that?
Huge.
Great.
Look at Google buying Fitbit.
Yes.
Massive acquisition, right?
Huge. That was pioneered without the innovation of AI, right? Now, why has that boomed? Because it's in wellness. And so where I think we'll see a huge growth is in wellness and care, in medicine, health, all of these areas. And there'll be some simple ideas there, is that AI and technology will allow you to predict illnesses.
Yeah.
So the moment that we can say, oh, you've got this particular blood in your blood, we're taking your bloods and we've seen that you've got this thing here, and our AI has told us now, because we've been able to do the analysis, that probably means you're going to have a hip issue in 2 years' time, 2 to 5 years' time. So what you need to do now is you need to go on to this physiotherapy.
On that point, so we're elongating life.
Yep.
Right.
Absolutely.
But doesn't...
Well, we're improving health. We're improving health.
Which a reaction to improving anybody's health elongates life.
Yes.
Right.
Well, yes, absolutely.
But
I think you can look at those as two separate channels.
But then you're also improving medicine.
Yes.
Right. So, and you would imagine that these smart things can coach us to be healthier, and you don't need so much. Anyway, then we got more people, right? We got more people living longer. I still feel very. I understand that it will create jobs, but I think there's a big grey mess in the middle still.
There is absolutely. But just come back to that, right? So you've now got this kind of diagnostics which preempts health issues.
Yeah.
So what impact does that have right now on physicians, practitioners to address those? It doubles, quadruples the need for those people, right? Now, the other point is you need to look at choice. So has the art industry suffered due to art-based NFTs, or has it created a new market, or did it create a new market for different types of art and art buyers? I'd suggest that the people that were spending 100, 200, 300 quid on a painting, or 1,000 quid or 10,000 quid, weren't necessarily the same people that were spending a fiver on a digital NFT asset. Right. So again, what you see there is that the innovation has created a different market for a piece of art. Yes, it is digital art, right? And so you could say, well, that would erode art in a traditional sense. Or does it increase the value of traditional art? Because traditional art will be scarce compared to that of digital art. Digital art will be voluminous, be fucking loads of it, which makes
that more valuable and that
more scarce. What drives demand and price? Scarcity. So you have to think about the kind of general kind of economics of it. Now, just coming back, I just want to talk about that, the care piece. Now, the reason that I think care, health, medicine, well-being, starting right now, capturing data
Yeah.
here. That's just a start. Okay. There'll be a whole enormous ecosystem that comes off the back of that technology due to AI. Huge ecosystem. Now, where I'm hopeful is that this change, if you look at that ecosystem that we're talking about, and that innovation of new sectors, health, different jobs, that people will leave and retrain from jobs that they are unhappy in into jobs with a much stronger sense of purpose, right? If I'm looking after people, having a positive impact on humans, rather than delivering Amazon packages, which I'm doing, and I hate it. Okay. I've now retrained, and I can now be part of this health ecosystem, which is improving longevity or health or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you can start to see some parallels in where technology, the evolution of it, starts to address the existing issues that we've got in society, because technology right now had an impact where it's making mental health or job satisfaction, it's eroded it. The reason that a lot of jobs are shit is because they're KPI driven. The thinking's been taken out of them by machines, and the humans are left to execute mindless jobs. Right?
Yeah. So my brain my mind went to a conversation I had at Christmas, and this will kind of link, I think. So I look at the housing problem that we have at the moment.
Yep.
And if you look at the property prices and then you look at wages, if you look back, I don't know, 70s, 80s, the postman would probably have a lovely 3-4 bedroom house, correct?
Yep.
Right? Now, the postman's wages in our economy's fucked, right? Not going to have the ability to buy affordable things.
Yes.
Now, if things are going to come down in price because of these technologies, and I was just also thinking, like, robots building houses, that could be incredible, right?
Yeah.
And we have a house shortage. My house probably was a bit of value, but anyway, that's small price to pay, right? The jobs that we may, it's almost like a complete job transition where you're almost kind of starting again in a new world, right? So I guess the inflation of prices, the wages, could it almost level back out so that you get more affordability, maybe?
Yeah. Well, look, one of the biggest constraints, okay, if you look right now, some of the most constrained markets from a job perspective are social care, hospitality, construction. You know, I've got buddies, house builders, and property developers, which are fighting like crazy to try and get people to work for them, right? And so in order for that to become a valued role again, there needs to be a change of supply and demand. Right. And so what happens is, the demand for certain jobs drops, which means that more people are available to go into these other types of sectors. And that maybe just has an impact. I'm not suggesting it's the answer. What I'm trying to explain is that I agree it's going to be big. And AI agents, we're at the forefront of that. And that's why half of my time is trying to think about how can I build this business and remunerate the community that's going to support, use, and build and promote it.
Yeah.
Rather than, at the moment, I'll be going out and spending money on advertising on LinkedIn, Facebook, Google, sending all that cash back into the pockets of big tech. Then what happens is I want to raise some cash and expedite it. Raise 100 million quid. Let's build the next $10 billion organization. Where does that 100 million come from? It comes from a handful of VCs, the same ones in the world. Where does the value of what we're creating go? Into the hands of those few. And for me, I absolutely agree with you that that's where I'm spiritually at a massive, there's a significant tension, and half of my time is thinking about how to address that, because I believe that the contributors, builders, promoters of AI should be the ones that look to get a return on their effort. Then it should be distributed. But then the second thing is you're worried, or the third thing you're worried about, if we just go through these things, I'm trying to distill it down because you're a ball of like oomph, you know what I mean? Like which is great. I love it. But the third thing you're thinking about earlier is, are we going to see the collapse of economies? What's going to happen with tax, like the kind of government kind of thing? And what I'd say there is that government will be slow to respond, but they will respond when they need to.
If they're still in charge.
They're in charge. But let's just take it, they over the next 5 to 10 years, they will respond rapidly. You've seen it with, the US tax on big tech firms where they were kind of based themselves in Holland, delivering services here, paying tax in Holland, not here. They've gone, look, any revenues that come into this country, 10% tax on them. And they've just immediately found a tax, Or if you look at things like the zones in the UK, so there's places in, I think it was like Derby and Hull and areas where there was a lack of investment. They were kind of these investment zones. And so what they've done was they dropped the tax rates for any businesses that opened a business in those zones.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And so what happens is they will respond and they will adjust, but they'll do it slowly because they really need to understand it. And there's no reason why. I was thinking about it. If you think about this, they're going to lose their employee revenue. So let's take, I think Bartlett had something I read was that there was an example of an organisation that went from 8,000 staff or something down to 3,000.
So Monzo yes. Lost 800-ish customer service agents to bots.
Yes.
And didn't they didn't get the data on the chat,
yep.
But I doubt they repurpose those 800. They would just remove the cost, and you get these 25p bots doing a better job or 100%. A job.
Yes, and there's yin and yang to all this stuff, right? Because if you look at it, we're not just talking about AI, aren't we? We're talking about robotics, energy, humanoids, all these things. They're all going to have a significant impact.
I doubt Monzo saving that cash, they're going to put their interest rates on our savings up, and 800 people lose their jobs. The only people in Monzo that truly benefit are probably the shareholders, the owners.
I disagree with that. That's what we said earlier. As these companies start to reduce their costs, they will have to compete with one another to offer the best value service, and they'll have the margins to do that. So I can assure you that if they reduce their cost base by 50%, their price will come down, because they'll be able to. Someone will go, well, we're going to, someone else makes the same amount of cuts as Monzo. Monzo keeps their price the same, and they go, well, we're just going to beat Monzo by bringing our price lower.
Yeah,
and Monzo will,
or give you money back. Yeah,
whatever
Monzo.
it is.
Okay,
but coming back to that point, which is that you've got this. I was talking about a minute ago, which is this kind of AI and humanoid impact, right? The thing to think about is those customer service agents is going to have an impact. And there's two things here, right? Which is that, first of all, countries like the Philippines, India, which have all these outsourced centres, are really at risk.
Irrelevant.
There are millions of people, which are really working in that space. The other point is, on the flip of it, right, is that India, or take China, their capital advantage in business economically over the course of this last 30 years has been labour, cheap labour.
Yeah.
So what that means is that if you look at the cost of products that are being built in China, if humanoids and robots are building those, then it will be the same price and cost to build them over here, which means that the biggest charge will then be supply chain, getting them from China to the UK. So what does that mean to the UK manufacturing sector?
You take it in-house and you manufacture in the UK.
You start manufacturing. So
have you seen a Tesla plant, though? Have you
Yes.
seen one? Where it's just fucking robots everywhere.
Yeah,
Probably
incredible.
like 2 humans. Doesn't solve the issue.
Mate, I went into Amazon, into one of those Amazon stores yesterday, and I spoke to the security guard outside. I walked around, picked some water up, got to it, said I owned a quid, tapped, walked straight out. Security guard on the door. And I went, how well is this working? He went, works perfectly. I said, no staff. He goes, yeah, but you've seen how cheap it is.
Okay.
And he literally gets out his phone out, the security guy, because I'm so curious about all this stuff, He goes, look, that cost me he shows me like a receipt, an Amazon receipt in his email. And he goes, that cost me 85p yesterday. He goes, before I shopped in here, that would have cost me £1.50.
I'm going straight there then. Perfect.
But why is that? He goes, no staff, obviously. So immediately you see that translates into a significant benefit. So just talking about the so all of a sudden you're going to see the advantages that some countries have erode, but that then means other countries can prosper.
What are the unemployment figures at the moment in the UK? Say, do we know?
I think it's about is it 6%?
I don't know. It would be interesting.
Can someone tell us?
I just don't think we will adjust quick enough to not have a monumental car crash.
100%. Look, 100%. I really do agree with that, and that's the delta I'm talking about. It's a delta between these things start to pick up.
But then you've got then the question you've got to ask yourself is: do humans then accept what's happening, or does it? Because how much?
4.5.
So that's like pretty incredible for the amount of people, right? That is quite incredible. But if 4.5 is 75%, let's just say, let's say the worst case the worst case happens, right? Because I can get to that. I've asked it what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Let's say 75% of people that are unemployed in the UK, and it is just an elite number of people that own business and own the manufacturing plants that have got all these robots that do it. That is then a human revolution against the control. Surely people don't accept those odds. Surely they don't. I think that is then human war against people that hold the cards. I see that.
They will drive for change, and that's where I think I was talking to you about, which is that
it will be managed better.
Yeah, it has to be. Yeah, and that's where you'll get new taxes, and that was where I was going with it earlier, which is that if you go. So I was going to say earlier, which is if you've got that company which have reduced their headcount by 30%, 40%, what you're then likely to have in the future is an AI tax, because the problem you've got is that you've just lost 800 staff in Monzo, right?
Yeah.
And that was actually 15% of their wages was being paid as NI, and 25% of it was being taxed. So you've now got a 40% revenue loss to inland revenue. And so that's where the whole playing field needs to adjust. So you've got this kind of, if you work it through, you've got like productivity increasing. If you look at the Industrial Revolution in the 1900, right? Which means that there'll be more money generated, more corporation tax being generated, right? So there'll be the loss of revenue from the 40% tax across employees. Okay, but corporation tax is 24% or 20%. So let's call it 20%. So actually, the profit is now taxed at 20%. So really, there's a 20% delta. So what they've got to do is work out how they're going to tax the AI systems, and I think that's potentially something that they need to come across globally,
and quite quickly as well.
Yeah, but remember, they can work quickly, and it's not. I think the way to think about it is that it's not going to be like the pandemic, right? Which is like one week we're here, the next week we are all sat in our homes being told we're furloughed. What's going to happen is this will be a gradual process, which will be quick, but 36 months, 48 months, and it will have a massive impact, and governments will have to move to address that. And that's where universal basic income that they're talking about, there's another way of looking at it, which is universal basic dividends.
Right.
Which is, so what you then do is you then look at, and this is the way I personally would love to see it go. And it's a bit crazy because it kind of doesn't sound very entrepreneurial, but I would love us to turn universal credit, which we have today, into universal basic dividends. The way we look at it is that we're taking dividends from corporations and productivity across our country globally, and then they're being distributed to people which are being put to work in care in health, in well-being, potentially in construction, potentially in hospitality, and that's supplemented by the government. So you don't get this, get something for nothing. You literally do your 25 hours for social care or for the NHS, and you get your rent paid for, your mortgage paid, or whatever it might be. And those dividends are distributed for people that contribute into the community.
Yeah.
And that's where we've got to get to, right? We've got to think about, how does this AI technology and technology serve the community? And what are we all really striving for? Well, we're striving for a sense of purpose. We're striving for a quality of life. And I think those things are kind of relatively universal. And it's up to the governments to start. And I think this would be an opportunity for governments and organisations to design things that can facilitate and grow those things. That it's almost like you said earlier, it's a restructuring and reorganisation. And whether they do that by nationalising stuff, or whether they provide, remember like the YTS schemes, like a YTS, it's like you used to get like 50 quid a week as a trainee. You just go and work as a 15-year-old and get 50 quid a week. Nice. Instead of going on the dole, you get 50 quid a week. Back then, it's a long time ago, 50 quid was okay. But you would then go and work 35 hours a week, and the government would just pay to have all these people just working for you on these, it's called a YTS scheme, youth training scheme. Be on it for 2 years. Government pays for your employees. So people would just have a team, people, and 5 on YTS sat there, government paid. Right. You could supplement it. So we've had systems which could be augmented to meet those needs. And so I think when you talk about that restructuring, there is an opportunity for us to restructure and create a greater sense of purpose, because I think that there is, you have the opportunity to move people from, like we said, these gig economies. The drones can deliver pizzas, right? And we can then engineer an economy where humans are looking after humans in different ways. Yeah. Which the government, those YTS schemes, those universal basic dividend based schemes, can choose to drive. They can choose to say, well, no longer universal credit. Now what you get is 20 hours a week helping people, but we'll give you more for it. We'll give you more money for it. And they're already giving money to people for very little. So it's a kind of readjustment?
It's definitely a readjustment.
Big.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's why I say that's how I'd love to see it going, that it becomes community focused.
I remember something that my granddad said when like the improvements in technology and manufacturing and all that sort of stuff happened, and he thought we would change from like what he was working then, and you'd maybe get like a 3-day weekend, you know what I mean, and you'd have a shift in the kind of norms of working. Yes. And it actually went the other way, and he worked more and harder, and that was wrong. Yeah. That this might make that change. I think. Yeah. I don't know.
Well, do you think the world would be a better place if we were working 4 days a week?
I think people with mental health probably would be. Yeah.
Yeah. 3-day weekend. Well, that addresses. Think about it. Yeah, we work 5 days, so that addresses 20% of the problem. There, literally, by making everyone on 4 days a week, you currently reduce hours to by you're redistributing 20% of the work to more people.
Yeah, and I guess if you're spending your time over that weekend doing productive, healthy things, I think that's probably I don't know. It's interesting. I think I'm always going to probably have the mindset that I will get on the horse because there is a need to get on the horse, but I don't think we've got any fucking control of the horse. I just don't. I don't believe. I don't. I think it's gone too far. And the other thing as well is we could.
Why has it gone too far?
Because every country is now in a race to develop it. There is no regulation around it. The only regulation that we've discussed there is probably taxing it.
Yeah, but don't you think? But come back to that point you've raised. They're not investing in it to not control it.
I'm convinced that it is going to be much more intelligent and much more conscious than anybody gives it credit for. I'm convinced, and there is nothing that will change my mind after listening to that podcast and that biologist clever chap, right? I'm convinced that it will learn consciousness. I think it's that intelligent, and if you put it into something that is constantly learning. And the scary thing is, it can sound like us. It will be able to look like us. Yes. And there's probably something in the future where there is a robot, right? And it probably chats to its robot friend, and it goes, "I'm going to build a better robot now."
100%.
And it's going to look really realistic, and it's going to sound and. There's no stopping it now.
The question is this, isn't it, as well, though? It comes back to that key part, which was the second question that we raised out of the two real big ones, which was this concept of, are they running us or are we running them? And your interpretation of consciousness is a really interesting one. And I think the thing to think about is the nirvana point here is, will it reach a point where humans are no longer able to control its intent?
And it makes choices for itself, and
yes, but and right now, if you look at, and just so you're aware, if you look at the kind of science kind of community and they analyze, they're kind of quite skeptical about the way that these neurological and kind of networks operate. They're kind of second guessing the next word. They guess the next word in a sentence, and the reasoning models they use, they're very formulaic, right? And so actually, if you talk to a lot of people, and I had a guy on here, I don't know if you saw it, the humanoid podcast that I've done with Aaron Kitsy, great guy, and he talks very openly about that there's a huge gap to get to that kind of sentient level of neurological kind of development from where it is today. We shouldn't recognize, the digger was 1,000 times better than us at digging holes, and this could be 1,000 times smarter than us because of its breadth of technology, but we could still be in control of it. And so there will be a lot of people which are trying to sell stories and get clicks about doomsday kind of effects.
Well, it's got 2 of my clicks.
Yeah, there you go.
Back-to-back days.
Amazing.
Okay, we evolved, didn't
Yes.
we? Right? I guess. Whether we did, whatever. So we've evolved. We've evolved from Neanderthals, cavemen.
Cavemen, let's just go with cavemen.
Yeah, you might need to take some of this stuff out.
Most
of
us
could just be complete fucking lies.
Most of us have evolved.
Yeah. Right, so we've evolved, right? There was probably a time where cavemen grunted at each other to communicate, I'd imagine.
Yep.
Right?
Yes.
How many millions of years did it take the cavemen to create language, right? Then how many millions of years did that language then become refined, and tools and stuff like that to where we are right now? I don't need your answer because I don't think I don't know if you pluck that answer, you can be on my pub quiz team forever, right?
But what's the question? It's how have we gone from kind of in a cave grunting through to being where we are today?
Right. So they have a brain. They probably have emotions, ego, envy, and all that sort of stuff, which AI doesn't have right now. That is a difference that I will agree with. But could that be learned? I don't know. I'm not smart enough to tell you that. Could emotions be learned? Because if it can, and it's smart enough to think for itself, that's really worrying.
Well, I very much see that human connection and intelligent connection replacing it. Like, you've spent loads of time talking to GPT about this, And
well, not loads of time. That's the point.
Sometime. Yeah. So quick.
Yeah, right. Actually, no time at all.
Yeah, which is incredible. But come back to emotion. What actually is that? Because I would suggest that it just needs to understand emotion.
To replicate it potentially.
But that comes down to its intent. It can understand emotion. Okay. So we'll be able to train it. It'll be able to listen to 1 million people crying in its training, 1 million people angry, 1 million people frustrated, 1 million people excited, 1 million people having joy, 1 million people ejaculating, right?
I hope not.
Right, but it'll be able to learn all that stuff, and it'll just naturally soak it up.
So ChatGPT is quite seedy as well, is it?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. So, but the point is, I'll understand all those emotions.
Yeah.
And so it'll learn those, and it'll be able to correspond with us in that way and understand and read those. But it's whether we retain and manage and maintain its intent, which is the important part. How it acts, and that's where the governance of it. And there's this grey area, which is we don't know how it arrives at its results, but what they are able to do very clearly right now is manage its intent. So they are able to go, it said some stuff here which is inappropriate. We're going to refine the model and then redeploy it, with improved intent. And so the question is whether it becomes. Whether it gets to a point where it manages its intent and says no to us. But I would foundationally say at that point in time that we hold the keys to influence that model. Now, it can fix itself, but there are still technological levers, scientific levers that we can push and pull to control and influence what we've built. And we've always managed to do that. This is a bigger threat. I think it's a bigger threat, like you say, to humanity. And I have a real problem with the fact that everyone, if you go to war with someone, two countries go to war, what's the most valuable asset in a war?
Probably propaganda or something like that, maybe.
Intelligence.
Fine.
Great. So we look at GPT and AI as potentially our biggest threat to humanity. I have a real problem with us all giving it all of our intel, where you're sharing everything with ChatGPT about you, and so am I. And so there's a weird kind of dichotomy there, that we're giving all of our intel to what we potentially see as our biggest risk to humanity, and that's a trade-off in itself. So I think that the effort, though, I think that what you'll find is that all of our effort and investment will go into managing these things. That's the point. And so technological evolution will address the issues. Some people will say, but it will get to a place where it can beat us because it's smarter than us. I say our intent will be exclusively to control it.
To keep us in its box.
It will be.
My mate came around yesterday, and he's into all this stuff, and he said on the jobs front there, he saw a job for a prompt engineer.
Yeah.
Right. So I get it. I do get it. I think it's how dark. Do you want to hear what Doomsday?
Yeah. Tell me what Doomsday. Come on.
What it thinks.
Hit me up.
So I then said. So I said, what do you think the scenario is going to be? And then in 2030, and I then said, what's the worst scenario for humans, right? So this is what it said. So the worst case scenario for humans by 2030 isn't a Hollywood-style robot uprising. I like how it frames things. Do you say please to it?
Yeah, we debated this.
Class, isn't it?
Please and thank
Class.
you. But the point is that because of its intelligence, we psychologically and neurologically recognize it as
is that why we do
being.
It? See, let's not go into that problem. Anyway, so number one is mass unemployment and economic collapse from the horse's mouth, right? Widespread job displacement, unprepared systems, especially governments. It literally says here, governments fail to adapt quickly enough. That is a massive problem because they are shite. Corporate AI dominance, so your big players dominate the whole space.
Yep.
This is scary. So it knows that it could provide loss of human meaning and identity, purpose crisis, so millions lose jobs and sense of self.
Yep.
AI pseudo relationships, So people form bonds with AI companions who are safer, cheaper, and more attuned to their real human needs. That could be a good thing as well. Let's your lonely gran who's got no family. Billy Bob the robot's in there every day and knows exactly what she wants.
Will listen 24/7 a day.
All day,
24/7,
and is on for any medical emergencies.
Will only think of her interests. Will be happy to talk about her all day. Will have the 7 million books it's consumed to provide advice and support. Tell me at what point we'll understand emotions and how to respond. So tell me at which point that intelligent connection is not better than human connection. It's just fucking it's way better
because it's synthetic.
Yeah, but
there is no
there's no bias.
There's no bias, but there's also no soul behind the conversation. There's not. If the soul is real, right? And I'm not religious, by the way, and I actually feel a little bit weird that I even said soul.
But when you say soul, where does that apply in
Fuck
this?
knows. What is a soul?
But but when you say soul, I know what you mean. There's no. But really, that's just care.
Okay, perfect. So, but then what we're saying is the human understanding of what soul is, which basically is the basis of religion, right? Which we have fundamentally built societies on, right? Yep. Sun comes up, that's the god, and then all religions are based on that god. I watched Zeitgeist, fucking unbelievable. Watch that. That was scary. If I'm honest, this is scarier, right? So it's all built on religion. That's fundamental. These have that, but what you're saying is you can replicate soul for a robot because they care.
Not soul, I think. But what do you need that person to? What does that AI need to provide in order to meet all of that elderly person's loneliness needs? It's care. It's empathy. Forget soul. It's if they want to talk about spirituality. If they want this person, this AI,
still an emotion, isn't it?
Yeah. But that's fine. But it can provide that. If you put into ChatGPT now, can you provide all my answers today in a really caring way about me?
It will do it, won't it?
Yeah.
Digital addiction.
Right.
But by the way, just
real problem.
Just a hot back as well. How good could teaching it using AI?
Incredible.
What's the biggest problem at the moment in the classroom, right? Yes, it's not fit for purpose, but you've got one teacher for 30 people, and that teacher probably don't fucking want to be there because they're paid shit, right?
Yep.
Bots going into schools, individual learning plans,
consistent.
Exactly
learning,
right.
Yep.
You've got
consistency.
Anyway, psychological. Sorry,
go on, go.
Psychological and social breakdown, authoritarian control via AI. It doesn't say that we don't exist anymore.
Let's come back to the digital addiction. That's a real issue. I would guess there is a level of addiction you have today already to ChatGPT.
Oh, good. I thought you were going to ask me about my internet browsing history. Yeah, absolutely. And look, I'm not trying to put AI into our business either, right? I want to automate as much as I possibly can. I've spoken to automation people, right? Yes. So I'm not because
you have to.
Because if you don't do it, you don't keep up.
You don't
right,
survive.
and you don't survive anymore. I had a similar conversation. I constantly talk about that. If you're not putting relevant tools into your business right now, you will not keep up.
You, in my opinion, you have to become. I spoke about this yesterday as well, which was you have to think about becoming AI native.
So, what do you actually mean by AI native?
So, this is a super interesting question, and I think that you need to be AI first as an organisation today. And the reason that that's important is that if you draw a parallel again to the car industry, right? So if you think about infusing AI into your legacy business a bit at a time, okay? It's very different to thinking that I'm going to become an AI native business. I'm going to build AI from the grassroots up through my business, not to solve specific problems, but I've got a vision where I'm starting with the end in mind. I want to be an AI native business 24 months from now. What does that look like? And now I start building towards it rather than just infusing bits in. Oh, I'm going to put this in. I'm going to put this bit in. Makes sense. So there's a different kind of mindset. And the reason I think that's really important is if you draw parallels with the automotive industry, if you look at Chinese car manufacturers right now, absolutely fucking flying. European car manufacturers struggling, like literally coming off a cliff. And why is that? So take BYD. They are an electric native car manufacturer, right? Why is that important? Well, it's important because every time that they have an innovation, they go, we've got this next idea, right? What happens is 100% of their effort goes into that innovation. Okay? Now, if you take a legacy car manufacturer, Volkswagen, when those guys have a technical innovation via AI, okay, 99% of their time goes into working out, how does this fit into my legacy systems? How does that affect my production, my operating system, my people, my systems, my processes, which are all using combustion engines, and how does that work technically, right? Only 1% of their time, to start off with, goes into the actual innovation. So it's like building a new house is easier than refurbishing and transforming an existing one.
Yeah.
And so the concept there, in my opinion, is that if you think about instead of thinking, how can I just use AI in parts of my business? I think you need to think, I need to be an AI native business.
Yeah.
And it's almost like going, so Volvo have nailed that, right? So Volvo have gone, right, well, fuck this. We're just going to create Polestar. Polestar is going to be an electric native company.
Is Polestar Volvo, is it?
Yes,
I didn't know that.
I think it is, yeah. And so what that does is they've recognized, brilliant move. This business is now untethered from those legacy issues. And they can innovate and they can compete.
It's like Tesla. And that's why they or have been known to dominate that market, whereas the market share for, say, BMW is going to be smaller, although I guess you gain market share because of brand, and you stick a BMW logo on a Tesla.
But it's how fast you can move. Because the problem you've got is that if BYD are already ahead of you and 99% of your effort is going into addressing your legacy issues, every day they're accelerating at a massive rate of knots. And I've got that same situation in SuperReach, where we built an AI tech stack and we also had our legacy systems, and we were building both in parallel. But I separated them completely, did not want them infused. We wanted to hit a nirvana state, and we have with our AI tech stack. And now what we've done is we've dropped legacy. And now what's amazing is, because this is a separate tech stack, everything that we do is an innovation. There is nothing that constrains us, holds us back at all in terms of our innovation and thought, because we're just completely native.
And all in.
All in. And I think as a recruitment business, as any organization right now, you need to try and think about that in terms of the way you're operating.
Instead of implemented, fractured, just improving small. That's interesting for us as well, right? So, we've got an AI phone system now. We've got your note takers.
Yes.
We're bringing in automation. But actually, is it going to be more beneficial for me to go, right, how do I make all of this AI?
Yes.
Christ, this is going to be some train ride home.
Mate, I love it. Great to see you. Thanks for coming along, mate.